107 days. That is the exact amount of time that has passed since Nancy Guthrie vanished into the dry, unforgiving air of Tucson, Arizona. For 107 days, a family has waited for news that never comes, while the very people sworn to protect and serve them have seemingly stumbled through one of the most mishandled investigations in recent memory. This is not just a story about a missing woman. This is a story about systemic failure, investigative ego, and the chilling reality that when the first 48 hours are wasted, justice becomes a ghost. On January 31st, 2026, Nancy Guthrie disappeared. She did not leave a note. She did not take her car. She did not pack a bag. Her house remained a snapshot of a life in progress, yet she was gone. In those critical moments following the discovery of her absence, the Pima County Sheriff's Office had a choice to make. They could have treated the scene with the clinical precision of a high-stakes crime, or they could have succumbed to the dangerous assumption that Nancy had simply walked away. Unfortunately for Nancy, they chose the latter. Sergeant Aaron Cross, a man who has been vocal about the internal dynamics of the department, confirmed that for far too long, the narrative pushed by the sheriff's office was that Nancy Guthrie had left of her own volition. This was a narrative built on nothing but convenience. It allowed the department to bypass the rigorous protocols required for a suspected kidnapping or homicide. But the evidence was screaming a different story from the very beginning. Let us look at the porch. There was blood found on Nancy's front porch. Real, biological evidence that a struggle or an injury had occurred right at the threshold of her home. In what world does a woman leave her life behind voluntarily, but leave her blood on the doorstep? This single detail should have frozen the scene immediately. It should have brought out the yellow tape and the forensic kits within the hour. Instead, the investigation moved with the speed of cold molasses. When you look at the forensic handling of this case, it becomes even more disheartening. A single strand of hair was recovered from the scene. One strand. I spoke with Maureen, a veteran crime scene analyst with decades of experience, and her assessment was blunt. She told me that if a technician finds only one hair at a primary scene, they haven't finished the job. Humans shed hundreds of hairs daily. If there was a struggle, there should be a wealth of trace evidence. Finding only one piece of evidence suggests a cursory search, a lack of specialized equipment, or a fundamental misunderstanding of the gravity of the situation. Retired FBI agent Steve Moore joined the conversation to add even more perspective. He explained that the most vital evidence in any case is often invisible to the naked eye. Fingerprints, skin cells, and microscopic fibers are what solve modern crimes, but they require a pristine environment to be collected. By the time the Pima County Sheriff's Office realized this was a major criminal matter, the environment was anything but pristine. The house had been released. It had been reopened. Family members, driven by a desperate need to find clues themselves, had walked through the rooms. The scene was contaminated. The damage was done before the real work even began. But the failures do not stop at the front door of Nancy's home. They extend all the way to the top of the Pima County Sheriff's Office and into the halls of federal power. FBI Director Kash Patel recently dropped a bombshell that should have every citizen in Arizona demanding answers. He revealed that within the first few days of Nancy's disappearance, the FBI was ready to mobilize. They had a federal jet fueled and waiting on the tarmac, prepared to transport DNA evidence directly to the FBI's laboratory in Quantico, Virginia. This is the most advanced forensic facility on the planet. They have the technology to process samples in hours that take local labs weeks. They have databases that span the globe. And yet, Sheriff Chris Nanos said no. Instead of using the federal jet and the world-class scientists at Quantico, the Pima County Sheriff's Office decided to send the evidence to a private laboratory. Why would anyone turn down the full resources of the federal government in a race against time? Steve Moore calls this the nuclear option of investigative errors. When a local sheriff rejects the FBI, it is usually a matter of ego or a desire to maintain total control over the narrative. But in a missing persons case, control should never come before the victim. The FBI director was so incensed by this rejection that he took the unprecedented step of going public. Law enforcement agencies usually handle their disagreements behind closed doors, often through subtle snubs like withholding invitations to the prestigious FBI National Academy. For a director to go on national television and call out a local sheriff is a signal that the situation in Pima County has reached a breaking point. While Nancy's family was suffering through the 100-day mark, the optics coming out of the sheriff's department were nothing short of insulting. Sheriff Chris Nanos has been frequently spotted driving a luxury Corvette, a high-performance sports car that stands in stark contrast to the grim reality of the Guthrie case. Let us be clear. It is not a crime for a public official to own a nice vehicle. However, leadership is defined by the image one projects during a crisis. When a woman is missing, when the investigation is stalled, and when the public is losing faith, you do not parade around in a symbol of luxury. You show up in a work truck. You show up with your sleeves rolled up. You show up with humility. Instead, the sheriff has offered nothing but vague assurances that the department is getting closer, all while the community watches him drive away in a car that costs more than many residents make in 3 years. This lack of situational awareness has fueled a growing movement to remove him from office. There is a recall effort currently gathering steam, and the County Board of Supervisors is being pressured to take administrative action. Steve Moore pointed out that while changing leadership mid-investigation can be risky due to the learning curve for a new team, it might be the only way to break the deadlock. If the current leadership is the bottleneck must be removed. The Arizona desert itself adds another layer of complexity and tragedy to this story. It is a vast, beautiful, and deadly expanse. In the months since Nancy vanished, there have been several false alarms where human remains were discovered. Most recently, a femur was located in a remote area, leading many to fear the worst. While it was eventually determined not to be Nancy, the discovery highlighted a dark truth. The desert is a place where secrets are buried. But even if Nancy is found in the desert, the forensic potential is still there. A body is a treasure trove of information. The location of a recovery site can tell investigators about the vehicle used, the physical strength of the perpetrator, and the direction from which they approached. Even after 107 days, DNA can be extracted from marrow or teeth. Trace evidence on clothing can survive the elements if handled correctly. But the key word there is correctly. If the Pima County Sheriff's Office handles a body recovery with the same lack of urgency and precision they showed at the initial crime scene, the chance for justice will vanish forever. We have to ask ourselves what kind of precedent this sets. If a woman can disappear in broad daylight, if her blood can be found on her porch, and if the local authorities can spend 4 months achieving nothing while rejecting federal assistance, then who is safe? This case has moved beyond the borders of Tucson. It is now a national example of why we need oversight in local law enforcement. We need to talk about the communication breakdown that Sergeant Cross mentioned. He described a scene of total confusion in those first few hours. The family was there, emotional and terrified, and the responding officers had no clear direction. In a well-run department, there is a protocol for everything. The first officer on the scene secures the perimeter. The second officer starts the witness log. The supervisor establishes a command post. In Pima County, it sounds like there was no ship captain. Everyone was on deck, but nobody was steering. This lack of command and control is how evidence gets stepped on. It is how witnesses are allowed to leave without being properly interviewed. It is how a 5-day delay happens before the FBI is even notified. We are now at a crossroads. The mainstream media has largely moved on to the next headline, but the Guthrie family cannot move on. They are trapped in January 31st, waiting for a phone call that may never come unless we keep the pressure on. We need to demand that the Pima County Sheriff's Office releases more information. We need to demand transparency regarding why the private lab was chosen over Quantico. We need to demand that Sheriff Nanos stops prioritizing his public image over the hard work of detective work. Every day that passes makes the trail colder. Every day that passes allows a potential perpetrator to feel more confident that they have gotten away with it. We cannot allow that to happen. Nancy Guthrie was a member of this community. She was a mother, a friend, and a human being who deserved better than a disorganized investigation and a sheriff who seems more concerned with his Corvette than her recovery. I am calling on every person watching this to take action. Share this story. Post it in your social media groups. Send it to the Pima County Board of Supervisors. Let them know that the world is watching Tucson. Let them know that we haven't forgotten Nancy Guthrie, even if her local sheriff seems to have moved on to his next public relations stunt. We are going to keep digging. We are going to keep talking to experts like Steve Moore and Maureen. We are going to keep asking the hard questions that the local press seems afraid to ask. Because at the end of the day, if we don't fight for the Nancy Guthries of the world, nobody will. The systemic failures we see here are a warning to every community. When ego takes precedence over evidence, the victims are the ones who pay the price. Nancy has already paid too high a price. 107 days is 107 days too many. It is time for answers. It is time for accountability. And it is long past time for justice for Nancy Guthrie. We will not stop until the truth is uncovered, and those responsible for both the crime and the failed investigation are held to account. The desert may be vast, but the truth has a way of coming to the surface. We just have to be brave enough to keep looking. Thank you for standing with us in this fight. This is a journalistic investigation into a case that should have been solved months ago. We will continue to follow every lead and provide updates as they become available. Keep Nancy's name in your hearts and her story in your feeds. Justice is coming, but only if we demand it together.